Now, I really wanted to talk about the cost of deer hunting land. And, you know, whether it's free or you pay a lot for it, you always pay something. Free isn't free. There's no such thing as free. You know, if you're considering deer hunting land, a lot of times people will say, well, I can't afford private land. I can't afford to lease. I can't afford to hunt private land. I'm stuck hunting public land, whatever that is. And first off, I want to mention that, you know, really a lot of times it boils down to priority. People don't want to hear that. You know, I have people that would say, well, I could never hunt the deer like you do on private land, leasing land. And yet maybe they're in bowling leagues. Maybe they have a really nice fishing boat, snowmobiles, a cabin up north. The bottom line is it's not that they couldn't, it's just that they don't make it a priority. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have different interests. I'm unfortunately really slanted towards whitetails. That's what I love to do, plan, strategize. It's my career, my profession. It's what I enjoy to do. So I put a lot of my attention towards whitetails. And even when I had very little money, there were times where really to afford, you know, half of a lease that was $2,500, I had to pay $1,250 for. And even though I wasn't in ball leagues and bowling leagues and didn't have a fancy boat, snowmobiles, fancy house, car, anything, it was still a lot of money. But that was my priority because I didn't do those other things. That's what I wanted to not only spend my resources of money towards, but also my time. So whether it was a combination of Christmas presents, birthday presents, selling a kidney, whatever it might be, I made sure, didn't sell a kidney, but I made sure that I had that priority going back into the days where I had very little money, and I just made it a priority. And that meant I didn't get to do other things, but there was still that cost. Here we're on the other extreme. You know, we have our home here. This is why I've been shooting in the back, videos in the back of my pickup truck or in the cold pole building, because our house hasn't been ready, and we're just kind of in those transition period. We haven't had a kitchen, for example, right here. We haven't had a kitchen since early July. It's now December 22nd, I believe, and so we're 2 days away from Christmas. And I believe we actually might have a stove before Christmas, which would be amazing, and a kitchen and a refrigerator down here and all that. And you can say this is an area we're converting from a garage to living space. We have our flooring right here they'll be putting in. They had to level the floor for the drainage in the garage. Fireplace back there, TV. It's kind of all coming together. But I can guarantee that this is the most expensive way to hunt land, is to actually own it. We're gonna start with number one, public land. And I wanna point some of these out because you might be surprised. You know, public land. Public land, you can do a lot of scouting from home. You can drive a great distance to hunt public land because you don't have any monetary investment or resources spent for that public land directly. You're not paying to hunt that public land, you're just going to hunt it. And so maybe put a little bit extra time into travel. I've driven down, it was 10 plus hours to go to Ohio to hunt public land. It's 6 to 7 hours for me to hunt public land in Michigan. I've hunted Pennsylvania the last 3 years now. I've been out, this was my 20th season hunting Pennsylvania. And right now that's currently about a 13-hour drive. So I tend to look at it like, I'm not spending any money for the land. How about we spend a little bit of gas money and get out there? And really I can learn a lot from your living room, from your couch. Looking at aerial photos, I'm trying to find a huge amount of habitat change. That usually is where you'll find the bucks, and you find it away from roads, half mile to a mile plus away from any parking areas. And you can take 20,000 acres of public land and narrow it down to about 1,000 acres you want to scout certain pinch points within those 1,000 acres. So you can narrow it down pretty quick. Pretty low cost. And what I want to point out with public land, though, is you never have to settle for that half hour away chunk of public land that's being hit by everyone and anybody that hunts in the area. Really think about, I'm not spending that much, let's drive. You can find some incredible deer herds, quality deer herds on public land. You know, I used to go down to southern Ohio, quality deer herds. Pennsylvania, they've had antler point restrictions in place. Now Pennsylvania, I'll just point out real quick, just to be a little bit controversial, but Pennsylvania had a 1 buck rule for decades and decades. That's the way it's always been, as far as I know. Yet they had very poor herd structure, age structure. It was not until they actually put an antler point restriction in place that they now have quality herds out on public land. They thinned the doe numbers out. It used to be we would hunt in the early 90s and see 40 deer coming through the hollow. There'd be a spike or a 4-point in there. Sometimes if you wanted to shoot it, there were so many other deer around it that you couldn't get a shot off because of all those other deer around it. It was crazy, the numbers. They reduced the numbers. They put the antler point restrictions in place, and now, not because there was a 1 buck license rule, but because they put the antler point restrictions in place, they have an older age structure of bucks. Ohio, southern Ohio, incredible herd structure, quality habitat, breed some great bucks, incredible bucks, really good quality state land and timber rotations, clear cuts. And of course, everyone knows about the public land in Iowa, North Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas. There's a lot of good places you can get into public land and have quality hunting in Kentucky and experience great herds, and maybe you drive a little bit more for it. That's where that cost comes in. I've driven to public land 10 hours, 11 hours straight, and then I've slept in the car for an hour before it gets daylight to go hunting. And so even just sleeping in a car here and there on one end of the trip or the other, until you really need to get into and take a shower and use a hotel. So there's ways you can do that, bring all your food from home and enjoy public land, even tent it and stay out in the campground. Now, number 2, this is one where I think people think that it's free, that you go ask for permission to hunt. I can remember all the way back into the 90s where I helped Fred Matthews off of Argyle Road, actually out in the fields. I didn't know a thing, but he would say, pass that tool, pass that tool. When a tractor broken down, I could at least help him out there a little bit, get some trash out of the woods. But I can remember even then, back then, paying him $100 to let me hunt his 5 acres of cover. And that $100 at that time, when I was paying him, was a lot of money in the late 80s, early 90s for me. But it cost something. And for that, yeah, I was just getting permission, $50, $100, maybe just helping him. But bottom line is, when you don't have a monetary investment into something, then is that landowner going to appreciate it when he finds out, in the case of one hunting property that was by us, a family had been hunting it for 17 years, occasional gas card, cookies at Christmas time. The landowner found out that that land was worth $1,500, that people would pay that to lease that land. And the landowner then he felt like it almost been taken advantage of. That, and it wasn't necessarily the case, but when those same people offered to pay the same price, he didn't allow them to lease it because he felt that they had gotten it for free for so long. He didn't have any obligation to them, and he was a little miffed that they had used that land at that high cost if someone else was going to lease it or wanted to lease it or even buy it for hunting land. So permission, the bad thing about getting permission for land is you can lose it in a heartbeat. It might be that land goes to someone who's willing to pay what it's actually worth for that lease and to actually lease it. It might be that the relatives from the landowner begin to hunt and you're going to lose that land. It's not something you can count on. And so there's that cost. I know Dylan, he and his hunting buddies, they had hunted land where other people had the use of it. Well, you make these plans, and let's say you put food plots in, mock scrape, stand locations, access, and all of a sudden another hunting party comes in. Think of all the time and effort that you spent on that land, and because you didn't have total control of it, because there's other people using it, because you're just using it by permission, you don't have anything locked up, you can waste a lot of time. And so we're not just talking about dollars. We're talking about overall cost, which cost of resources is time, money, effort. And we go down to that third step, the lease. Now there's some people in the hunting industry, ooh, leasing's bad. Well, that's because they all hunt by permission. So they don't like when someone actually pays what that property's worth. And there's a cost, there's a property worth. You could look at it and let's just say southern Michigan, a random 40-acre parcel, if it's in good deer habitat, could be worth $1,500 to $2,000. Maybe it's worth $1,000. Whatever that cost is, there's a going rate for that. That's the cost. For someone to expect to get it for free, and it's not even their land, I don't know what that says about that person. They're not respectful of that amount. I'm all for it. If you can get it for permission, get it for free, and you have it all to yourself, and you love that control, and you have that level of control, then by all means, I'm not saying you should pay for it if they're not asking for money, but just know that if it's permission, you could lose it at any moment, and that's a bad thing. Leasing locks it up a little bit better. We leased one property in Wisconsin for 12 years. I have my 7th season on another right now, and so if you keep that relationship with the landowner and you're paying them what it's worth, you're giving them automatic raises within there, you're trying to keep up with what the going rate is going for, you're not trying to take advantage of them in any way, then you'll find that most of the time that you'll have a long-standing relationship with that person if you lease. What's interesting about leases is just, if you just look at some basic numbers, in the past we leased a property that was about $500,000 in value. If someone paid for that land at $500,000 and bought it strictly for deer hunting, which most of the lands are going for, so that was $500,000 someone's willing to pay for that land for deer hunting. Well, we leased it for $3,500, and we leased it to start at $2,500. 12 years later, we were giving them $3,500. We gave it some automatic raises within there, but we were leasing that land at a cost per year that would have been likely less than 1 month's payment for that land, not even including taxes or anything if you owned. You'll find that if you lease land, you can lease it for 1/20th per year of what you would pay for that land. 1/10th, 1/30th, whatever the number is. You have a lot less invested. You're paying what the lease price would be worth, but it's a very affordable way for someone to lock up some land and be able to maybe plant some food plots, work on the timber, put mock scrapes out, water holes, tree stands, blinds, and have some assemblage of control. There's never the control of actually owning the land, but leasing is the poor man's option if you look at it that way, of hunting quality private land, having a little bit of control, and not having to own that land. So when people are against leases, I say they're against the little guy. They're against the little guy that wants to put a priority, like I did back in the day, of not being part of ball leagues, bowling leagues, fancy boat, fancy snowmobiles, vacation home up north, smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day and downing a 12-pack of beer a day. Everyone has their priorities. I chose to lease land. That's where I put my resources, go on family vacations that were cheap, and that's how I was able to afford land. I couldn't afford to buy that land and hunt that land. And so again, when it goes back to leasing land is an opportunity for the little guy to actually have some level of control and as opposed to buying land. Now, right now, I currently hunt public land. I hunted Pennsylvania again this year, Michigan and Pennsylvania last year. I've hunted Ohio for 7 years in a row in the past. So I do that every year. I've hunted public land since the 80s, every single season. So I hunt public land, I hunt lease, because I'm not going to use something permission and then lose that level of control and all the hard work that I put into it. All of a sudden, Joe Schmo, cousin, whatever, steps out on the land and ruins my entire hunt on a 30-acre parcel. I don't have time for that. I don't want to waste my time or money for that. Money being putting money into food plots, time, effort. I lease, and then I own land, and that was what was about buying our house right here. We have a cornfield right out here. We see deer in the yard. We're in that location. I've owned land in the past at my home site, but I can honestly say that I could probably lease 10 parcels in 10 states, really good ones, and instead of owning this piece right here. So ownership is great. You have that total level of control, but it's definitely the most costly, depending on, even if you have 20 acres, 40 acres. I know of 20-acre areas where 20 acres is $10,000 an acre, you're spending $200,000. Know of other areas where it's $4,000 an acre, so you're paying $160,000. I know of other areas where it's still $1,500 an acre for a 40, but those tend to not be great areas to hunt either, or have a good population. So owning is always the most expensive. Leasing is the poor man's way to actually, to me, get private land, get on private land and hunt. If you're hunting by permission, pat yourself on the back. If you can get away with it and it's free, more power to you. But I know people that have actually had permission that actually went to the landowner, and because they wanted to continue to hunt there, and they say, hey, you know what? I just want to level with you. I think your 40 acres is worth $1,200 a year, and that's a fair price for leasing, and I want to give that to you because I'm hunting a $200,000 parcel for free. The hunting is worth something. we're willing to offer that to you if we can lock this up for a longer period of time. That's always a great way to do it. It seems fair between the landowner and the person that's getting to hunt it for free. Public land's awesome. And if you're saving that amount of money on the land, how about drive a little bit and find a really good spot? They're all over the place. And when we talk about the quality, habitat aspects, it doesn't matter if it's private land or public land, it's all the same. Finally, you get down to club, being a part of a club, being a part of leasing land. I know people that lease, around here there's a 2,400 acre piece, between 24 and 2,700, it's huge, that people lease. And I don't know if there's 10 lease, people that lease the land, 10 hunters, 15 hunters, but I would never want to be a part of that. And I don't care how high quality the land is. And that's the same with the club. It's pretty cool for people to say a club. Now, club is more social. There's a lot of times people that go into deer camp, they like the social aspect. It's not as much about the deer hunting. But if you really care about the deer hunting, you're going to want to find a place that you can actually call your own for the moment. Like if you're leasing land, and let's face it, even owning land, the average person doesn't own the land for a lifetime. I think the average is 5 to 10 years that someone owns land. And so you're only owning it for a moment. You only have that control for a moment. But when you have club land, I just wanted to discourage you. I've seen so many cases where I go to lands where they used to be the best of friends on this 160 acre parcel, and now they split it down the middle. This family hunts the 80, this family hunts the 80. They don't get along anymore. Deer can cause a lot of problems like that. It's not all hunky-dory. I like being a part of the camp in Pennsylvania that I was for about 15 years. Actually longer than that. It was 93 through about 89 or 98, 99. So I'm getting my dates mixed up. So 93 through about 2009. So 16 years, 17 years, something like that. What was nice there, it was about 15 acres of private land, and we all hunted the national forest out in Pennsylvania. So people would drive, I'd drive 20 miles, 15 miles, and then walk in 2-3 miles. It's like you had the whole place to yourself wherever you went, even though you had 17 guys on average in deer camp. That was kind of a cool thing, because I did like the social aspect, but we weren't all fighting for tree stand locations and territory within a big private club that a lot of people have. So I'd encourage you to explore each one of those. Public land, maybe look at driving a little bit further because you're not spending a lot. Even going with a group of people, you can all split on gas in a campground or a hotel. Permission, just be very wary that you could lose that at any time. Always look at what's fair to the landowner for the costs that you have. And maybe if you can afford it, it might be something that you can actually lock up for several years and enjoy a little bit higher level of control, not wasting your time and resources of building something that someone else takes away within a family or someone else that hunt by permission. Consider leasing as that option for people that don't have a lot of money and you want to place that priority on deer hunting. You want some level of control, and really it is a small fraction of the cost of ownership. Owning land, what's interesting, I've seen people that can't stand people leasing land, but they think nothing of someone paying $500,000 for that deer parcel just to hunt deer. There's something okay with that. But for some reason, someone couldn't lease that land for $5,000 or $4,000 because that's bad for deer hunting. It's kind of funny. Again, it's just people that have permission and they're jealous of this, or they don't want that being taken away. Ownership's a lot, and then be very wary of the club. What's the cost for deer hunting land? Well, I'll tell you, if it's free, it's not free. There's always a cost of your time, your effort, let alone the dollars spent, depending on if you own the land or not. We're looking forward to actually having a kitchen at our home, our hunting lodge on our home right now. We might have a kitchen for Christmas. 2 days away, there's a lot to come together, but we're looking forward to it. Finally have a fireplace set up. This used to be the garage down here, and now we get to sit down here and have views of our land and our woods, our cornfield, and we love living out in the country. And it's a huge investment, largely for deer hunting, I will admit, and our love and passion as a family for deer hunting. I hope you can find the perfect deer land this year. Go into it knowing that you're going to spend some money or spend a lot of time. And I think if you go in with that attitude and you look to assemble some level of control with that deer land, then those years that come down the road for deer hunting, you're going to experience a lot of reward, The more you have invested into the land, the more you put into the land, the passion, then the more you get out, and really rewards that last a lifetime. And so I encourage you, I've always looked at it like I'm going to spend what I can afford to have some decent deer hunting property. And I made the decision long ago even to move from the Thumb area of Michigan to the UP of Michigan at that time in 1998. Because I looked at it like even if I saw 0 deer in the UP of Michigan, at least I had all that public land and potentially some more private land than having to deal with the trespassers that we had down in the Thumb area and finding 20 sets of deer tracks, or 20 sets of people tracks on your land when you came back in mid-December because the neighbors were driving your deer, or having shots hit the corn behind you. We had that happen, hit the creek behind us, or the river, the Cass River. Literally a slug hitting the river. I made that choice. I'd rather move somewhere where land was a little bit cheaper. Maybe I didn't see as many deer, but I had that peace and relaxation that comes from actually working the land and scouting the land, getting to know some public land too. We had a kind of a combination of it all at that time, leasing in Wisconsin, owning in the UP of Michigan, and hunting public land in the UP and in Pennsylvania at that time too. So find the perfect land, understand the cost going into it. And I think if you spend a little bit and prioritize that, you're going to find a lot more reward in the long run, a lot higher level of control, and an enjoyable piece of land and deer hunting land that maybe you can hunt for not only next year, but hopefully for 5 to 10 years to come or more. Now, as we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.